Import and export of goods in the first 8 months of 2025. FDI sector continues to lead growth. Trade surplus slightly decreases. According to new data released on September 6th by the General Statistics Office, Ministry of Finance, Vietnam's import and export activities in August and the first 8 months of 2025 continued to record positive growth, especially in the foreign direct investment (FDI) sector, although the overall trade balance decreased slightly compared to the same period last year. Stable growth. In August 2025, the total import and export turnover reached $83.06 billion, up 0.9% compared to the previous month and up 16% compared to the same period in 2024, of which exports reached $43.39 billion, up 2.6%. Imports reached $39.67 billion, down 0.8%. In the first 8 months of the year, the total turnover reached $597.93 billion, up 16.3%. Exports reached $305.96 billion, up 14.8%. Imports reached $291.97 billion, up 17.9%. FDI dominates. The FDI sector, including crude oil, continued to lead exports with a turnover of $229.27 billion, up 19.3%, accounting for 74.9% of total exports. The domestic sector reached $76.69 billion, up 3.2%, accounting for 25.1%. In August, FDI exported $34.22 billion, up 2.6% compared to the previous month, up 27.5% compared to the same period. The domestic sector reached $9.16 billion, up 2.4% compared to the previous month, down 17.1% compared to the same period. On the import side, FDI reached $197.2 billion, up 25.1%, accounting for 67.5%. Domestic sector reached $94.77 billion, up 5.3%. Export goods structure. Processing industry accounts for nearly 90%. In the first 8 months of the year, the processing industry group reached $271.06 billion, accounting for 88.6% of total exports. Agricultural and forestry products reached $25.92 billion, 8.5%. Aquatic products $7.15 billion, 2.3%. Mineral fuels $1.83 billion, 0.6%. There were 29 export items over $1 billion, accounting for 92.1% of total turnover, of which 7 items exceeded $10 billion, accounting for 67.8%. Imports focused on means of production. The group of means of production goods accounted for 93.8% of total imports, reaching $273.91 billion, of which machinery, equipment, tools, and spare parts accounted for 52.2%. Raw materials, fuels, and materials accounted for 41.6%. Consumer goods reached $18.06 billion, accounting for 6.2%. There were 38 imported items over $1 billion, accounting for 91.2% of total turnover, of which 2 items exceeded $10 billion, accounting for 46.2%. Import and export markets. The United States and China lead. The United States is the largest export market with $99.1 billion, a trade surplus of $87.0 billion, up 26.8%. The EU ranked second with a trade surplus of $25.6 billion, up 10%. Japan had a trade surplus of $1.5 billion, down 9.3%. China is the largest import market with $117.9 billion. Vietnam had a trade deficit of $75.9 billion from China, up 39.8%. Korea and ASEAN had trade deficits of $20.1 billion and $9.4 billion respectively. Trade balance. Trade surplus slightly decreased. In August, Vietnam had a trade surplus of $3.72 billion. In the first 8 months, the trade surplus reached $13.99 billion, down from $18.84 billion in the same period last year. The domestic sector continued to have a trade deficit of $18.08 billion, while the FDI sector had a trade surplus of $32.07 billion, showing a large dependence on FDI enterprises. Conclusion: import and export continue to be a bright spot of the economy, especially thanks to the FDI sector. However, the gap between FDI and domestic sectors and the trend of decreasing trade balance pose urgent requirements for improving domestic production capacity and diversifying export markets.